T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff of Falcon 9. Falcon 9 is clear the tower.
Welcome to another installment of Space Geekery. Today, I follow up the LEGO Saturn V with some SpaceX goodness. After having the LEGO sitting on the shelf, I started thinking, I bet somebody has already modeled the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket in 3D somewhere. So I went to a very popular website called Thingiverse, and a quick search comes across this rocket here. It's beautiful. The guy's painted it black a little bit. He's got different pictures of the printing and construction and how it looks in the CAD. So I thought, okay, let's do this. And you can see that there are 4 files that make up the entire rocket. There's 4 separate 3D objects. This is stage 1, stage 2, the payload, which are the payload fairings that contain whatever thing the company wants to be put in space, like a communication satellite. And then this SS, which actually is the second stage rocket engine, which goes inside the bottom of the booster and allows you to slide them apart. So I downloaded the files and set off for printing. Now the real Saturn V is 111 meters high, and the LEGO one is almost exactly 1,000 millimeters. The real SpaceX rocket is 74 meters high, so that means the SpaceX rocket needs to be 666 millimeters high to match the scale of the LEGO. So I brought each piece into Simplify 3D, used that scaling factor to get the height, and then printed them out. A couple of complications. If we go back and look at the parts again, this part prints fine. This part prints fine, but the main booster and the second stage are both too big for the printer, so I had to print them in 2 separate pieces. So let's take a quick look at what we ended up with. Okay, I decided to print the 2 easiest parts first, the ones that could be printed all at once within the volume of print on the printer. So this is the fairing. The payload goes inside here, communication satellite or something. And this turned out beautifully, scaled up to the appropriate size. But because I had it set on high, it printed the smallest amount of material in each layer as it could. This took 10 hours to print, and it's almost hollow. You can see the light through it. But 10 hours for this. So I trust the printer now that it's not going to catch on fire, so I start a print and I go out, or I start a print and I sleep and wake up in the morning. So this one worked out nicely, and then the part of the second stage with the second stage, what they call the vacuum Merlin engine installed, this one also printed out beautifully. I think, yeah, it printed like that. It's also was done on high quality, so it took something like 8 or 10 hours to print. It's very, very light. Again, you can see right through it, but the quality is excellent. Now we move to the parts that I had to print in 2. First, the booster was first I printed the top part, or actually the bottom. This is the bottommost section of the rocket, and these are the legs that pop down, the landing legs for land landing and landing on the 2 barges. But for some reason, it didn't print the 9 Merlin engines on the bottom. I did find a kind of a misshapen chunk of white plastic in the bottom of the printer, so I think something went wrong with the way the Merlin engines attach here, and you can see maybe that there's actually little hollow spaces, 9 hollows, and I think that's where the model designer placed his 9 engines, and I don't think he left enough material for them to be really securely attached. So it printed like this, printed nicely. I'll have to redo the nozzles. Then this is the rest of that piece. This piece is 150 millimeters high, so it's the absolute maximum that I could print. These will get glued together to make the first stage booster. This will attach to this piece, like this, I believe. And then the only thing I need to do is the nozzles that were missing from here. So I did that. I sliced it and just printed enough of the nozzle material as I needed. But we had a bit of a problem. Let me see, put some light on the subject. Oh, that's better. So the nozzles came out, and this camera doesn't autofocus, so the nozzles came out a complete mess. Some of them are quite good. Other ones broke off or came out as a pile of goo. So this is not good. And it's because the support material I printed is only coming up a few millimeters. This support material right here is not part of the model, but it supports the thing you're trying to print. And when you've got something that's this delicate, you really need support material so you don't end up with this and pieces that have already broken off. So I'm going to redo this with much more support material, and I'm going to walk you through how I can print just this piece without printing the entire bottom of the first stage booster again. So we are almost there. These 2 plugs hold things in place, and this is going to go, where does that go? Ah, this goes in here. Goes like this. Ooh, and it fits nicely, actually holds it in place. So when the rocket takes off, it gets up and jettisons the booster, and then the vacuum Merlin lights up and psh, off we go.
Oui, amigo.
Okay, so a couple more videos coming to show you more detail, and we are almost to the end of the build. Well, I finally figured out what happens when you run out of room on the printer vertically. It'll do 150 millimeters, and then it just kind of goes a little crazy. It's desperately trying to print the rest of the model, but we have a significant printing issue once we hit 150 millimeters. Now, I knew this print was too big for the tired, sad little printer, but I figured it would stop or something, because I had to print this part in 2 sections. But with the software I have, there's no way to cut it off and say only print this part. So I woke up to this morning, trying to print that very large section of the rocket, and it was going to take 10 hours. So I started it printing last night and went to sleep, and this morning I woke up to this. This is a different result than the previous one, where it stayed in place and rocked back and forth and put a giant plastic blob on the top. The rocket body fell over, and then the printer just made confetti out of the PLA, working very hard. Okay, now you saw the problems we had printing the rocket nozzles. I'm going to make some changes to the printing process and print them again. And I decided to walk you through how that actually works. So this is the software that I use called Simplify 3D. It's a paid piece of software, but if you're doing as much 3D printing as I am, it's really worth the money. There are some open source or free things out there, and they're just not quite what you need. You end up more frustrated than anything. So the good thing is Simplify 3D understands hundreds of 3D printers. So what you do is you tell it what kind of printer you have, and it gives you this, which is a virtual view of your printer. This is the X and the Y, and then the Z axis goes this way, or the Z axis for those of you still banging the rocks together, and it basically shows you the volume of the cube that you can print in. Then the first thing we do is we import our 3D model, and we're going to be redoing the first stage from the model. So, and then it warns us that the scaling factor in the 3D object appears to be off. So I'm going to let it go ahead and rescale that for me. And it drops it in place, and there it is. That's what we expect. Now, what I did to make it match the scaling with the Lego Saturn V rocket is I calculated what this should be scaled at given the size and how it compares with the scale of the Saturn V. So what we're going to go here is we're going to change the scaling factor to this magic number of 5203, and we hit tab, and it resizes the X, Y, and Z axis, which is good, except that now we recognize that it's too big for the printer. And this is how I printed it initially. I printed this section, and then I printed this section. Although the printer or the software, when I printed this, we got that big blob of plastic as you saw before. So I would have to use another piece of software to take this object and pre-slice it and then load it in here. But we're not going to bother to do that, because all we want is this very, very bottom piece. So what we're going to do is slide this down so that just the nozzles and a little bit of the rocket actually appears on the printing plate. And we do that by adjusting the Z offset to this magic number of 246. So we now have the nozzles and just a tiny slice of the bottom of the booster, and this is all I want to print. And this is what I did before. Unfortunately, because the nozzles are held on by just a tiny little bit of material here, we had the problems with our print, so that didn't work. So what I'm going to do now that we've told the printer this is what I want you to print, we're going to adjust the process to tell it this is how I want you to print it, not just what. So we come in here, and there's a tremendous number of options here. I'm just going to walk you through the ones that have meaning. So we are printing on with PLA material, plant fiber. We want very high print quality, and we're using the left extruder, which is where I have my spool of white material installed. We come in here to the layer tab, and what I'm looking for is I want this very bottom layer to be just solid, so it's got the best possible base for the nozzles to attach to. So I'm going to print 5 solid layers of material here at the bottom, which should be fine. Then we're going to use a skirt, which is helpful when the printer is warming up. You want it to be, the nozzles to be hot, the plastic melted and flowing nicely. So what it does is it's going to draw 2 outlines around your printing object just to make sure everything's flowing smoothly. So I always use that. For infill, I want the nozzles to be as thick and strong as possible. So I'm setting my infill to 100%. What that means is Imagine you wanted to print a 1-inch cube. If you used 100% infill, that would be a solid block of plastic. Not only would it take a long time, but it would use a tremendous amount of printing material. So you can adjust this from 1 to 100. Say 10% would be a reasonable value for a cube that you're just going to look at, because it uses only 10% of the material inside the cube. The sides, all 6 sides, are fully formed, but inside it uses a kind of a ribbing structure to keep the strength, but to have a lot of hollow space inside. So that definitely comes in handy with some of the other things I've printed. But I want total strength and full infill here, so we're going to set that to 100. Now, this is the big difference from the first print to this one. I'm going to use a lot more support material to support the nozzles as they're being printed. And I do that by upping the infill percentage, and I'm also telling it use support material up to the point where there's only a 5-degree angle on the object being printed. So it's going to use support all the way up and almost to the top here where the curve starts going totally straight north and south. That will provide a lot more strength as we're printing. The rest of this is fine. So what we're going to do now is say prepare to print. It analyzes your 3D object, analyzes what part of it you want to print, and applies those settings as we walked through that dialog before. So now it shows us how the printer is going to execute. And you can see the blue on the nozzles and the green is the support material. And these little ribbed structures, that's the support material. So we've got a lot of support with just a little bit of the nozzle sticking up on the top, and that should be fine. Now, one of the cool things this does is it will let you see in simulation how your printer is going to print this piece. And it's simulating every single move that the print head makes. So there's our skirt, 2 lines around. Now it goes inside and it's starting to make the print that we want. This is obviously going to take a long time, but if I switch to layer, you can see it shows us a layer at a time how it's going to print. So I'll do that again a little bit slower. And you can see the nozzles and the support material are being printed simultaneously, giving lots of support. As it comes up, the nozzles widen, the support material backs off, and we come to the end and the nozzles are complete. So this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. So I save this file and I'm calling it Falcon 9 nozzles, and then this is the file that I copy onto the SD card for the printer, and then we do the print. And for the magic of video editing, I will show you how this all turns out. So good luck to us. Okay, after the reprint with more support material, this came out beautifully. All the nozzles are fully formed. They're all in the right place. There's no goo, there's no mess, but we're going to have to take away a lot of this support material, which actually I'll use a small screwdriver or my tiny pliers, but it's quite easy to remove that support material. Then what I'll do is I'll sand things down a little bit, and I'll glue this onto the bottom of the booster, and you'll never know that these two were printed at different times. So one more step and we have a full rocket. Okay, the SpaceX rocket is complete, and let's walk you through some of the details and some of the shortcomings which were generally mine. So as you can see, this is fully built, and I've actually applied some stickers with the SpaceX logo, the American flag, the Falcon 9 logo, and also the TICOM logo because this rocket launched the Thaicom 6 and 8 satellites. So living here in Thailand, I figured that was a fitting tribute to the rocket. Now, let's see if I can show you some more. The second stage comes off just like it should, and that fits nicely. One of the things I didn't anticipate is when I printed and scaled this, I included the nozzle part of the second stage in the total height calculation. So the scaling of the entire height of the rocket is off by this much. So that's my fault. Fits in there nicely. Now this is the joint where the printed section matches the other printed section, and you can see I used a lot of tools and sandpaper and knives and stuff and made a huge mess trying to get these this part here at a nice flat 90-degree angle. I didn't quite get it. There's a small angle like this to it, but that's the best I could do. I tried to fill in the gap. I tried to paint it with some white acrylic paint, but the acrylic paint is a different shade of white than the way the material comes out of the printer, so that doesn't look particularly good. The booster stage is made up of two separate parts that fit nicely together. This is the other gap that I had to do. This one came out much better because this is where it fell sideways on the printer when it reached the 150 millimeter limit. So a little bit of sanding and trimming, and that turned out to be a much better joint. The nozzles on the bottom was a particular issue. I printed the bottom nozzles the second time, but because there's so much support material, in order just to get the nozzles to print correctly, it was not working out well to remove the material and keep this whole module intact. So I ended up breaking off the nozzles and then gluing them onto the bottom of the original booster. And I really do thank the guy who built this 3D object, but I have to say this is the weakest point of his design, because the nozzles are held on to the bottom of the booster by almost nothing. It would be good if that could be much more robust, and you can see that the nozzles very cleanly came out of those rounded holes, and that should be a much more robust interface between the parts as he was modeling it in order to make that work. And because I had to individually glue the nozzles into place, the rocket itself is not particularly stable, although I did manage to get it to be able to self-stand. But now you know why SpaceX doesn't just stick this on the ground and launch it. They've got the entire gantry that holds the rocket in place as it's blasting off, or just being worked on the pad. So yeah, you can see it's lacking stability. And when it first printed out, it was all just white. It looked okay, but it was really missing something. So I found the appropriate logos online, saved the images, made an A4 sheet in LibreOffice, scaled them to the size needed, and then I went to a print shop and used their very high quality photo inkjet printer on a piece of paper or a piece of plastic that's essentially made to be a transparent sticker, which is exactly my use case. So I think it looks pretty good. It's got the SpaceX logo, American flag, the Falcon 9 logo, and then Thaicom on the top. And that's about as good as we're going to get this model. So, lessons learned with this one. 1, use a piece of software to pre-slice the model, the object model. to fit in the printer and then print those pieces individually and then glue them together. That's the only way you're getting a clean joint. Also take a look at the model and see if there are any points of fragility, like with the nozzles, and also the grid fins are held in very, very loosely. So I ran a bead of super glue all the way around the grid fins. And I actually found a YouTube video where a guy tested different kinds of glues with the PLA material from the printer, and he found that the Loctite Ultra Gel was the best one that he found. Oh, come on. I need my other hand. There. And I thought, there's no way I'm finding that in Thailand, but I got lucky. Went to the store, and here it is. Loctite Super Glue PowerFlex Gel. And the gel nature of it allows it to kind of stay in the place that you want it without it being watery and running away. So I've gone through 4 of these so far. I wish it came in a larger size, but you can see compared to the size of my finger, that's all you get. It's 3 grams worth of material, but I can live with that. Okay, so let me put the rocket over there next to the Apollo and we'll see how that looks. Okay, and now on the rocket shelf we have the Apollo Saturn V and the SpaceX Falcon 9. And they're almost to scale, except for my boo-boo about the second stage booster. But you can see the difference in scale, and everybody's living happily on here. I did, for those of you who remember, I had to add a support plate along the bottom because the 2 glued sections kept falling in and the rocket landed on my head a couple of times in the middle of the night. So I've strengthened that. I've added more wall stickies. So hopefully it'll all stay in place. But that's the rocket collection for now. And have to think about what I want to put up next. Okay, special bonus video. As I grow my obsession with SpaceX, I find more fun things to do with my 3D printer. And here's one. This guy, APRZY15, made a 3D model of the SpaceX landing barge. Now, SpaceX has 2 of these. One recovers rockets off the coast of California from the Vandenberg launching facility. One recovers boosters off the Atlantic coast from Kennedy Space Center. And one is called Just Read the Instructions, and the other one is called Of Course I Still Love You. Both of these names come from a book by Ian Banks called The Player of Games. They're spacecraft that are almost living, and he gives them, there's a whole space fleet with very amusing names. So decided to print this out. It was very straightforward. There's this white frame and then the black piece that lays on top. They printed perfectly the first time. It's just the right size for my phone to lay on there. Almost looks like you could put an inductive charger into the back of this thing if you had a phone that had inductive charging, but I just lay mine out on it with the cable plugged in. So go ahead and download this and give it a print because it's a very cool thing.